Welcome, I'm Jeanette Hummel, and this presentation is about solving ethical dilemmas applying the virtue theory. I'll briefly go over the culture of law enforcement, some of the current challenges it faces, present a mundane scenario based on a true story of a bully cop, explain the importance of having the right mindset, of exercising unconditional respect, adopting the guardian philosophy, and explain how virtue ethics can have a positive impact in policing. I hope you walk away with an understanding of how applying these concepts will result in positive change. Let's talk about the culture. Law enforcement continues to be a male-dominated field. With that comes a lot of testosterone, chauvinism, and arrogance. While we have seen positive changes, we're not there yet. The culture is resistant to change, has a warrior mindset, and some still adhere to the blue code of silence, showing more loyalty to their fellow officers. Many of the problems in policing seen today arise out of the attitudes and behaviors of officers who are narrow-minded and self-serving. Unfortunately, the behavior of a few bad apples coupled with bad policies have resulted in public distrust. Even worse, the traditional training offered to new recruits is heavily based on soldier-like mentality. They give the aspiring officer the impression that they have to be ready for war when most of their time is spent in local communities dealing with civilians and solving problems. Let's identify the problem. Recruiting good officers is challenging because everyone has their own personal motivations that led them to choose the profession. A majority say that they enter the field because they wanted to help people and make positive changes. However, many will become cynical and develop unconscious biases, which are stereotypes about certain groups of people. And because they see the worst in humanity, some fail to exercise respect for people in general. This not only makes their job more difficult, but it also contributes to the increase in crime rates in the communities they are policing. After all, if you don't have the support and cooperation of citizens, you're not going to be able to effectively fight crime. Law enforcement relies heavily on people to report law violations. They can't do it alone. This is why it is so important to maintain professionalism, show respect for everyone, including towards lawbreakers, build relationships with the community, and apply virtual ethics. I'm going to share with you a story based on real life events that happened to someone I know. Two officers patrolling an impoverished neighborhood see a young guy walking down the street and automatically assume that he's up to no good. The young guy is on his way to a friend's house and sees the two officers, but because he has had previous negative encounters, he turns back towards his home. The officers become suspicious and begin following him. Meanwhile, the mother is looking out the window and sees her son being followed by the officers. Once the son walks in the door, the mother walks outside and asks the officer if there's a problem. One of the officers tells her to mind her business and shoves her for no reason. At this point, her son and daughter both come out of the house. Naturally, they're very upset and they were vocal about it. The offending officer becomes even more angry and tells them all to get on the ground. At this point, everyone's confused and questioning what for. The officer calls for backup while his partner's looking at him like, "Are you serious?" Backup arrives and all three were arrested. They were charged with disorderly conduct for simply asking the officer why they were there to begin with. On the way to the police station, one of the officers admits to the mother off the record that this particular officer is a knucklehead and is constantly arresting people for no reason. Yet none of the officers report him. Perfect example of the blue code of silence. This situation is very common in low-income communities across the country and has exacerbated public distrust and contributed to the negative stereotypes against police. Also demonstrates a lack of respect towards certain segments of the population. Similar to the Chip Huth video of the importance of mindset in policing, the story of the bully cop demonstrates what can happen when an officer fails to see people as people. Their way of fighting crime is to fish with a net and cause decent people to get caught up in the criminal justice system. Not at all helpful when you're trying to gain public trust. If this officer would have responded to the mother in a respectful and civil manner, there would have been no need for the events that followed. Instead, he should have resorted to an outward thinking mentality, considering how his actions affects the people he's policing, and that those people matter just as much as he does. versus inward thinking, only caring about himself and putting people in jail in order to brag about how many arrests he has made. Now let's apply virtue ethics to the bully cop story. Virtue ethics calls on the individual's virtues. Aristotle proposes certain characteristics that make the person a good person. Among them are qualities like fairness, honesty, loyalty, self-control, discipline, and so forth. This method calls on the officers to identify which virtues will make him a better person. In other words, what kind of person should I be? When the bully officer encountered the mother, he should have called on his compassion, civility, self-control, and friendliness. She's someone's mother, and how would he feel if someone disrespected his mother? He could think of some virtues he exercises on loved ones. Then the officer needs to determine which virtues to practice in similar types of situation. He needs to take a deep breath and trust that kindness in many situations will produce far better results. It might not work all the time, and at that point, then he can proceed with a more harsher tone. The last step is to repeat these virtues until it becomes second nature. The premises of this principle is that if the officer is genuinely good, has these virtues, then she will act according to their values and their ethical dilemmas will be properly handled. The principle of unconditional respect requires outward thinking, to treat all people with dignity and fairness, looking at the human side of people and thinking about how you would like to be treated if you were in their position. Having unconditional respect for all persons would have helped the bully officer remain professional and not escalated the situation that resulted in an unnecessary arrest. This principle is probably the most important, especially among the lower income groups who operate on respect. If they feel that you have treated them with dignity and kindness and respect, they will bend over backwards. That's how you gain their trust and cooperation. The Warriors to Guardian video we were assigned introduced us to the Blue Courage, which is a new type of training available to law enforcement. This training teaches new recruits how to interact with normal citizens on a day-to-day basis. It teaches them to view themselves as guardians of people and reinforces their duty to serve and protect. This philosophy is in line with the virtue theory and can help them learn and form good habits before they become jaded. Younger people tend to be more impressionable and receptive to newer things than older folks who are less likely to embrace change. In conclusion, officers can apply virtue ethics to any dilemma. These principles will help police officers build trust, gain public cooperation, and develop a better reputation, which ultimately leads to lower crime rates. Officers should understand that the most important weapon they carry is not their gun, it's their mindset. Ultimately, their attitude will dictate the results of any situation when they first arrive at the scene. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. This concludes this presentation. Thank you so much for your time.